What do I mean by the church being Israel? We are. The Eastern Orthodox Church is the same faith of Judas Maccabeus and Moses and Abraham. Now, we know that there is continual revelation. Moses probably didn't know, or Abraham, we have no evidence that he knew anything about the laws of Moses. In fact, many of the prescriptions in Leviticus and in the Torah are deal specifically with the remembrance in Egypt, which uh, Abraham knew nothing about. He may have been given something prophetic saying, your children will sojourn in Egypt for 400 years. They will be strangers in a strange land and bring them out again. But he couldn't know about, the tying of the white and blue threads on the corners of your garment to signify the crossing of the Reed Sea or Red Sea or Jordan or however people want to interpret. Oh my God, interpret what that means. But as Archbishop Lazar constantly says, the Old Testament is about the church. There are some Christians who believe that this is called substitution. They believe that Judaism can go on and still be valid, and and then there's Christianity, but the Jews are still favored in God's eyes. The Orthodox Church considers them apostates. This is because when Christianity was just a cult inside of Judaism, it was a sweeping cult. There were a whole school of Pharisees that were siding with the the Christians. And Pharisee is a derogative term in the New Testament, but we have to look at who Jesus was speaking about. He was speaking to the teachers, the actual head guys. Most of the Jews in the first century probably didn't have the affiliations of Pharisee or Sadducee. I mean, we can look back and categorize them now, but the Pharisees, we get out of the Bible, are mainly those who taught. And then we have scribes and Sadducees and zealots and Essenes and other groups like this. Well, there was a huge faction, and some people estimate up to 75% of Jews were turning towards Christianity. In reaction to this, they called the Council of Jamna, and they said, we're going to seal the scriptures, because these Christian books are going to make it into there. And anything that can be seen as pro-Christian, we're going to cut out. Maccabees, I believe Tobit and Judith were seen as leaning too much towards Christianity. Parts of Ezra that gets called Esdras, things like this. They said, no, 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 no. And the Jews were resoundingly pro-Septuagint. They loved the thing. Until Christianity came around, and then they said, whoa, this could be, no, no, no. And they pulled it back to being a nationalist thing, because in the first century, we see many proselyte Jews. The Jews were going out evangelizing, and they were accepting people. This is historical too, accepting people through baptism and not circumcision, which we see Christianity pick up on that. So, since we are given the Messiah, since the Messiah came, and those who follow the Messiah are still part of Israel, those who reject him are cut off. Why Protestants don't believe this, I don't know. They must not believe their faith to be connected to the Old Testament. And I don't think they do. They largely ignore the Old Testament as something dirty or Jewish or something like that. Well, as for being Jewish, it's actually not Jewish at all. And when I mean Jewish, it's not Jewish, I mean it's not modern-day Jewish. Modern-day Judaism comes from the Khazars and comes from a reaction against Christianity. Because Judaism was a lot more, it was a lot more pluralistic than it is today, or than it was in the 3rd century after the Christians had rose to power. There was a lot more multiplicity within Judaism, a wider range of beliefs, and we see this in the 1st century. When Christianity comes around, they sharpen it. They actually form an orthodoxy. There was really no orthodoxy in Judaism before that. There were competing schools, Sadducees, Pharisees, and during different times there were different groups of people, but Judaism is a very malleable thing that we see, starting with Abraham to Moses to the monarchy and then to the exile and the Maccabees. But they closed the canon in fear that the populace would add these books, would add these New Testament books. So they sealed it, and they actually stopped it right at the return. Malachi is the last one. So they shear that off. This is what I mean when the Orthodox Church is Israel, and we have all the blessings and cursings from them, because we are merely a continuation of what Abraham had started. And if somebody doesn't believe this, why are you Christian? If you think Judaism is just valid, yeah, they're all. I mean, it's a very strange idea. And if you look at many of the precepts that are held today by the Jews, they were invented long after Christianity. And Maimonides seems to try to. He was not popular in his day. He was hated in his day. He almost seems as kind of an Uncle Tom of Islam, and he really was. His whole thing, oh, the Messiah is this, Messiah is that, after Jesus came, and the Jews never explained the suffering servant. It's just this, as if the Bible, you can read the Bible and say this is a messianic prophecy, this isn't. No, even the Sadducees and the Pharisees disagreed on what was messianic and what wasn't. They disagreed on what was canonical and what wasn't. Messianic prophecies really are only seen by looking back, or in some cases, wow, this prophecy really didn't come true about the Assyrians, so it must foreshadow something else. And we see this a lot. So when the Jews say, oh no, he has to come and establish this whole kingdom because Maimonides said it, yeah, he said it 1,000 years after Christ. Or 800, or whenever the hell he lived. So these arguments just don't stand, and we see, oh, you're only a Jew if your mother's a Jew. And they can't point to where this started, because it was a pagan Khazar tradition. If you look in the Old Testament, if your father is Jewish, you're Jewish, or you're Israelite, not the mother. I mean, look at Naomi. I mean, I can just keep going on. Ruth, and if that's it, then there's no Israelites, because Dinah was the only female of Jacob. The rest of them were men. They married Egyptian wives and Canaanite wives. So a lot of the things that we see and accept as Judaism today really have nothing to do with the Israelite kingdom. The continuation of the Israelite religion is Christianity. And again, if you're a Christian and you don't believe this, why on earth are you Christian? Why aren't you a Marcion? Why don't you cut off the Old Testament? Oh, that's right, because these are forgeries of a religion. It's Eastern Orthodoxy. That is the Apostolic Church. Yeah, if you hate the Old Testament, you're going to have problems with what the apostles say, because all the apostles were Jewish. Peace to everybody. Again, Jews, I am not speaking against you. You have your own religion and we disagree. What I am talking to are the heretics inside Christianity. Peace to everybody, and may we live in peace and harmony with each other, and may Sharia law never prevail in the West.